Hello everyone, welcome at Studio Free Press Matters. My name is Ruth and I'm your host of today. At Studio Free Press Matters, we give you a regular update on everything important related to press freedom. Today it's the 25th of May and it's also International Missing Children's Day. And that's why we are going to talk about the project Mind the Children. Within the project, there are a number of organizations active. First of all, Lost in Europe, which is a collective of journalists. And we also have Defense for Children, which is a child's rights organization based in the Netherlands. And Free Press Unlimited, who is responsible for the project management and the security of the journalists involved. I'm very happy to announce and to introduce to you Adriana Homolova. She's from Lost in Europe. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
And of course, Veronika Pisorn, your project coordinator of Defense for Children. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi. Nice to be here.
Thank you for being here in the studio, Free Press Matters. Adriana, to start with you,
Yes.
Can you... this project, Mind the Children, is all about raising awareness of the issue, the big problem that a lot of migrant children are literally lost in Europe, right?
Correct.
Can you share your perspective on this problem?
Mm-hmm. So, with Lost in Europe, my role is actually to collect the data. So, I am not that much into singular stories, of which are, of course, the most important ones. But I try to quantify the scale of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And recently we have collected data on missing migrant children from the past 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we have came across this very huge number. In the end, when we put all the numbers together, it was more than 18,000 migrant children going missing in Europe in the past 3 years, which is horrible.
18,000, more than 18,000
18,000
over 3 years. And
Yes.
you started collecting the data as of 2018?
Yes, 2018, 2019, 2020, and we don't even have 2020 data from all the countries. So there's probably
Even more. And we're already in 21, so the numbers are increasing.
Yes.
Veronika, what is Defense for Children doing with this data?
I'd like to just add to this perspective. You mentioned that not all countries are reporting. In addition to that, these are the numbers only of children who have come in contact with someone from the government, either through an asylum procedure,
Right.
migration procedure, or being identified as victims.
Okay.
One of the main issues that we talk about in the EU in European migration and trafficking flows is a lack of identification. So this is disregarding the entire group of children who might be moving around undetected, who are still children, who are still vulnerable, and who still deserve protection and information, support, everything else a child deserves. But yeah, I just wanted to add that to the end.
Right, so the number could be easily doubled, or you don't know?
No one knows.
No one knows.
And it's funny / sad in our field that we still refer to one quote from someone from Europol from years ago when they mentioned 10,000 missing children. And because there's no new reliable comparable data, we still refer to that number. And
Right.
and that's unheard of in any other field.
Yeah.
If you look
You
at...
have actual data,
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
But then what Defense for Children ECPAT has done in the Netherlands, so we have the really great position of being a child rights organization that has both a migration team and a trafficking team. And what we see with this problem is that the children are divided between different actors, different systems, and different policy instruments. And so you have the migration section that talks about children migration, you have the section of children in general, child protective services, social workers, and then you have the part that talks about anti-trafficking. And what we can do is, through our own connections within our own organization, but also through our combined networks, get information from the field, from our NGOs, but also bring those policymakers, bring those decision makers in contact with each other across those borders. So you guys work cross borders geographically, but also in a multidisciplinary way.
So that is why it's so important to have these data that actually Adriana is working on,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah.
Yes, very much. We also saw, to also add to what Veronika said, the numbers are in different place in every country, if they are there. For example, France is not collecting data at all. UK is collecting data, but we don't know where it is. Denmark is not collecting data at all because they say that the children go to visit their friends and family in Norway and Finland. But not only where the data are is confusing, but also what do they actually measure, whether one child can appear twice in the data, we don't know. So it's there's basically no guidelines for these organizations how to even collect the data, and I think it's very difficult to have an informed discussion on a higher level about the problem if you cannot quantify such a simple part of it, which is like how many children are we talking about.
But are the children then even allowed to travel to another country to visit relatives once they're registered as a migrant? And they're not monitored at all then, if I listen correct to your story.
Well, what we have looked at is children who disappear. So obviously a reception center is not a prison, right? So the children, they are allowed to go out. They are allowed to, take a walk. They are allowed to go to school. Yeah, to have short trips and so forth. And sometimes they just don't come back. And this can have multiple reasons. And it can be,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
Probably
It's interesting because
them,
it's so difficult for migrants at all to travel or to go to another country. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, so in this project, we really specific focus on children who are unaccompanied or separated from their families.
Right.
That doesn't mean that other children don't go missing. That doesn't mean that other children don't become victims of trafficking. No. But this is just this specific
aim
advocacy,
of this project.
Advocacy project. And there are many, many reasons why children who, again, are already identified, so that's one part of the children in migration, leave reception centers. And sometimes they're forced by traffickers, and sometimes they are pushed by their families or their communities that say, you're in the Netherlands right now, but you're not going to get a residence permit there, you can't work there, and we sent you to Europe to help support our family, so we need you to continue moving to whatever they've decided is the best place. And what we see is that there's this opinion or this kind of prejudice, I would say, of, well, it's voluntary. They're leaving themselves. They want to go. We would not accept that for any other child. Why would we accept that for a child in migration who's even more vulnerable, without family, without information, without language skills, without etc.
And why accept this for migrant children?
Right?
Yeah.
Nothing.
So,
no identification,
so
nothing.
that's one part of it, and then the other part, people do say they went to go find their families. Unfortunately, family reunification from outside Europe with people in Europe, but also throughout countries in Europe, is a very slow process. European countries should start tracing an unaccompanied child's family immediately, right? Like you would do with any other child. Okay, I have a child alone, we need to find a family member, if there is one. What happens is a lot of European countries say, well, we're going to first decide if they really get to stay in our country, and then we'll try to find the family. Or they do the tracing, but it's not an effective procedure. And what we see is that if you're a child who is alone in often inadequate life circumstances, maybe not even enough money for food, or
you don't speak the language,
right.
I mean, they're all kind of
right
hindered.
So you're in a bad situation and you don't understand the rules, and no one's really communicating with you specifically, and well, I have a family member in Germany, so I've waited for 2 years and no one can tell me when I can go, so I'll just go myself. So that is something that happens, of course. That's one of the factors. But I don't want to forget that there are many, many victims of trafficking who are, where the traffickers, these organized networks from country of origin, country of transit, and then country of exploitation, work together and say, well, go to this asylum center for a week and then call me. So you have the phone number that you need to call. And there could be threats of retaliation against family members, against yourself, plus you're a child,
Right.
and this is an adult who's telling you something, and you don't know what else to think.
Right.
So it's a really complex...
And they don't know their rights.
Right.
The question is, what rights do they have?
What rights do they have? We have a really great framework, actually, and that makes my job as an advocate harder. There's a very good legal framework of that.
We're talking about migrant children,
right? Especially unaccompanied children who have extra vulnerability elements. They have the right to assistance, protection, and a sustainable future solution. And
it is set down in a treaty or
you have it in the European. We've recently had also jurisprudence from different regional courts and state courts,
right,
that say, even if a child doesn't identify themselves as a victim, you have to give them information. They need legal aid, access to a guardian.
Right.
They need access to a lawyer. They need shelter. They have the right to education, healthcare. So you have the rights of a child to an adequate living standard,
right,
education, etc. But then you also have extra responsibilities of the government to protect children because of their vulnerability as children, as migrants, and as potential trafficking victims. And we don't do justice to these children if we say, well, they want to leave and they want to go, and they decided not to use our package of protection. Yeah. And like I said before, if we don't accept that for other children, we shouldn't accept it for these children.
No, totally not.
No, and another thing, because of this, the framework is so good, because you should treat this child first and foremostly as a child, and then as a migrant child. You have a big problem when child comes and then the authorities don't believe that this is a child, and then you can be in this process of them assuming, then trying to find out if you're really a child for a couple of years. And let's say you come and you're 16, you're 17, and then you're in a process of...
In the meantime,
you
age and you become
child.
18, and then you're not considered a child anymore.
Exactly.
The framework in the EU is really in international child rights, but human rights conventions, but also the EU has an anti-trafficking directive that talks about children's rights and the rights of children in migration. We have different asylum, procedural reception conditions directives. Now recently, which is a great momentum, there's really momentum for progress in this, we have the EU Child Rights Strategy and the EU Anti-Trafficking Strategy that came out in March and April, and both of them talk about the rights of children in migration and unaccompanied children in migration to protection and assistance.
Okay.
So and there's funding available, and the EU says we want to coordinate, but that makes our job as advocates more difficult, because I cannot say, we should pass a new law.
No.
So what we need is the EU to really push member states to take action and implement what's already there.
Right.
But we also need, and that's the role of Lost in Europe, I think, raising awareness and drawing attention to the individual stories and saying, this is a child.
Right.
It doesn't matter which policy instrument you use.
Oh, what country
or
the child is.
This is a person, it's a child that needs to be protected. That raises awareness, because we need the actual member states to take action.
Right.
And that's where you guys are so important, and I'm really glad to be able to work together on this.
Yeah. But maybe you can share some of those stories. I mean, give this child a face, right? That's also very, very important.
Oh yes, of course, and that's what my colleagues are doing. As I said, I'm really a tables
You're a
person.
data journalist, yeah.
But I mean, at Lost in Europe, we have a couple of files where we focus on, for example, Nigerian girls who've been forced into prostitution. We are focusing on Vietnamese children who are basically being trafficked from Vietnam to nail salons in Germany, or to grow weed in the UK, to kind of pay for their travels to Europe. So that's my colleagues make these stories. Were very well researched.
And are these stories then for you very helpful in your advocating for better rights for the children? Yeah.
Absolutely. One of the great things about having access to these stories is it really brings the focus back to the child who's at the center of this.
Right.
But it also gives us information about stories that we wouldn't otherwise discover. I also have the added benefit of working with a very large network of both child protection, migration, and anti-trafficking organizations that give us their information from the field. So those stories are valuable, and those stories are also what get policymakers, but also, first line responders, the law enforcement officers, to say, I agree with you, we should do this differently. And I think it's valid to say that everyone involved is a little bit frustrated with the situation. I mean, we talk to police officers, we talk to social services, shelters, and in different countries, also NGOs providing legal assistance and social support, and everyone says, this is very frustrating, we need to do something, we need more cross-border coordination. We need to treat investigations seriously and take action. We need to not neglect the link to trafficking, or at least the risk to trafficking and exploitation. And we need better data. So those things, everyone agrees on them. We just need to get that step.
Nobody actually is owner of this program.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So you within Lost in Europe, you take upon yourself to collect more data. What are you now working on then?
Well, it's secret now. So with Lost in Europe, we're not only working on missing children. I mean, that's also where the name is from, Lost in Europe. But we are also looking into pushbacks on the internal borders. We'll be looking into transfers of and how do children get transferred from one place to another, and what happens to them afterwards. I mean, are they even are they still in the same position? If they are taken from one place to another, or are they then being taken care of? So,
but it sounds very difficult to get those data, right? I mean,
it is, yes, and as I mentioned, the data are in different places in every country. The data are in different forms. There are different things being measured. The data are collected differently. So I think, as I mentioned previously, we also would be very happy to see more of a regulation, on top of how to measure this problem, where then the member states and the people responsible for the data collection could go to and be like, okay, we need, for example, to know the age of the children, the gender of the children, where they come from, or how long have they been in the reception center before they disappeared, because now the general idea is they come and they disappear very soon, but sometimes they may be there for a year or two. So we need more information in order to quantify.
Right. And with that data, you, as part of Defense for Children, actually can make sure that there's a follow-up, that law enforcement is done, etc.
Monitoring, we need that data to identify the problems, but also be able to analyze what are the causes, what are the possible solutions. Monitor, are these countries doing what they need to do using all the tools that they have? And I think it's important to have the story of the individual child, but then you always run the risk of getting an emotional response. It's easy.
Yeah,
but that's not gonna fix the system.
No.
And I think the added benefit of what you, specifically the broad range of work of Lost in Europe, putting all the stories together, gathering the data, is to show this is not a singular, there's this one city that's not doing this one thing. No, it's a systemic issue that's not getting enough attention.
I mean, it has to be if it involves 18,000 children, right?
Yes.
Unbelievable.
That we know of.
That we know of.
Right, exactly.
So the number is even higher, right? Well, thank you so much for sharing your stories here. And I truly hope that we are going to make progress together within the project of Minded Children. And if you want to know more about the project, check out the website mindedchildren.eu. or check the website of the individual organizations. And if not, then I hope to see you again on the next episode of Studio Free Press Matters. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.